every single time. I mean, my team is basically like, I wish we had a heads up. And I was like, well, the agency didn't have a heads up. And the brand just said,
yeah,
we're
this
going to
is
send
like,
it tomorrow.
these are all very normal complaints from the ad ops side. Unfortunately, we are not living in normal times.
That's exactly right. Yeah, everything's gotten compressed. It's been, are we recording yet? So
we are recording.
Yeah,
this
roll.
This can be, and we're rolling.
Oh, cool.
We've
Whereas,
first, let me give you a
Ryan likes
proper.
to say, yeah. Can we
Let me
give
give you a
man
proper intro. It's usually 30 seconds in. Dave Pond, VP of programmatic. What is your title?
Head of media strategy and operations.
Head of media strategy and operations for BuzzFeed.
One of those made-up titles that everybody.
Aren't they all?
Yeah.
I mean, welcome. You've been now at BuzzFeed 2 years, I want to say, give or take.
A year and a half, coming up on 2 years, and shorter than I expected. So
man, time flies.
Does it though?
Actually, it feels like it's like taking forever, right?
I was about to say March was like 3 years ago. So,
yeah.
all right. Well, let's kick it off. We started this conversation by saying we wanted to talk about the data side and how every single article is about the cookie is crumbling, but not a single article either A has a decent answer or B has an answer that doesn't involve the third-party cookie. So I'd love your general take on that, and just like, do you have a preferred direction, or maybe just something that, like, the stuff you absolutely won't do, just like the stuff that feels like snake oil?
I actually love you said that. I feel like a lot of companies are selling snake oil right now. And it's funny is that you're talking about like the DOJ coming at Google and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And they're all talking about identity in these meetings. And, you know, everybody in the industry, like somebody's been tapped at their company to say, how do they do it? And the next article that they put out is that they are going to sell their data. So it's just this really funny, like everybody's productizing it because they know it's successful. They need money right now. We're the same way. Like we've been doing that for about a year now. Nobody's ever heard of it, but it's not something we've been loud about. I don't think publishers have a lot of like products, I guess, to put out into the market that doesn't rely on the cookie. Everybody's working with Permutive now, who says they do not rely on the cookie. That's great. And that's fine. But what nobody is talking about, I think, is allowing brands to navigate sort of like the context, right? Like we've got a whole data scientist team that is telling, one, what makes us the most money, which is interesting. That's always great from a programmatic side, what type of content, but two, like how does that perform for a brand, right? Which actually, you don't really have to sell that data back. We could, but I think that there's less of navigating for brands around what does that look like? How do we actually get in front of this audience? Brands don't actually care though. That's the other hard part. It's like, it sounds great. It's not relying on the cookie. They're just asking for the brand and the cookie. We got another couple calls.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think the only way I've ever seen the amount of effort that you've described work for publishers is through the New York Times, or you call your product Obsidian or whatever. But like, even then, it feels more like just a PR thing so their sales reps can reach out to their B2B clients once more. But it's the only time it really makes sense is just if you use it in-house to make your ads, the targeting work better, because you know it's a performative lift. But like you can't, it's almost impossible at scale to turn that around and then sell that to clients, because what BuzzFeed categorizes things at is different than News Corp, is different than Hearst, is different than The Atlantic. Like until that is standardized and agreed upon and like the measurement is all the same, what are we doing here really? And like the media, if I'm a buyer, I'm like, well, congratulations, you did a thing, but like, I'm not buying it from you.
I think that's right. The only counterpoint that I have here is that everybody has their custom media units. 5 years ago, nobody would understand how to transact other than a 300 by 250 or good Lord, this 160 by 600s were so popular.
Oh, those skyscrapers, man.
Skyscrapers,
I still get asked why we don't run those.
They're the best. I mean, they got to be performant of like 0.0001% click-through rate, which is also antiquated. We won't touch on that one. But, you know, I do think that there's something, the more that pitch gets out there, the more buyers are going to sort of understand that it's something that actually works for them, and more publishers are going to come together. You know, you listen to like Steph Laser and Jana, and there's a lot of collaboration behind the scenes. This podcast is actually a really good example of people who don't just like sit on these massive secrets of publishers and they've got this secret sauce, right? A lot of us are doing similar things, just approaching at different angles, and a lot of it is just PR stuff, right? And so the more that a buyer hears that this is probably the way that you can do it, the better that they'll be able to understand it.
I mean, I would love if the cynical take I had before is not the case, and we can change things going forward. It just maybe it's the times we're living in. It often, and this is our industry, it feels like what is written about in the trades is like 18 months ahead of what is actually happening. We don't do ourselves any favors as publishers because people will tout the thing they're doing, which actually is just a thing that they've tested once, not necessarily a thing that they're doing with any regularity or selling with any,
Yeah, you know what's interesting too is as I hear and read, and we talk with real operators, right, about like you just mentioned, Dave, about what's working, what isn't. You know, there's always this want to be sort of perception that what somebody's working on is the silver bullet for everyone, right? And as opposed to being really, really comfortable for it being a tremendous sort of accelerator or stepping stone for your own business, right? Or for your own approach. So nobody's happy with the sort of short steps into something. Everybody just wants to have this giant sort of solution. Would you agree?
100%. And I also think that if you're a salesperson in any of our publishing organizations, you want to have that thing that you don't really have to sell. Like I've got a ton of envy for the e-commerce and affiliate thing that's just, I'm going to get you $1.50 for every dollar you send me. You know, that's what you sell, you know?
Yeah.
And data is not that. And you have to mobilize the sales force to talk about this idea. And if the brand doesn't understand it and the sellers don't understand it, then that's kind of the hard part of getting these ideas that will probably work, but you know, we're not going to pin our hat to something that'll work for 80% of our clients. And then the 10%, 20% that it works mediocrely, they're not jazzed up about it, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, the data sale piece as a publisher and as a seller and as teams even that help to enable that internally, it's never been an easy sale, especially not for a publisher, right? You know, we had different versions of just third-party data, or when we were laying on early DMP data and you know, having to have to take that and convert that into part of your sale. So now to take your own data and go out and sell, you don't hear a lot about the challenges that really truly exist there when there's just been very difficult sort of ways to get that going. So it's kind of interesting now. It's just like, we're going to be able to do it, you know? So
but it feels like the kind of thing that, like, unless you are a very verticalized publisher, like you really don't have data that anyone wants because you can't tell them anything that the brand doesn't already know.
And even then, that data is like part of the sales story, right, Ryan? It's like when you're really verticalized, your data is the lead about like why you're so verticalized, why you're so good in that, right? Instead of like an additive layer per sort of a la carte customer or category of business or type of campaign and the expected ROI and ROAS, right? So
before we go too deep in the data, I wanted to go back to a point that you made before, Dave, which is this. It is something that I've like slowly started to hate over time, but this notion of that most yield people think that they have their special sauce, and thus they can't share it with anyone else. Like, and by doing that, they think that if I give away all my secrets, then no one's ever going to want to hire me, as opposed to the other way where like, if I give away mine and you give away yours and he gives away his, then we can all like get way better.
Great
and
point.
It's a yield person is good through process and thought, not necessarily through tricks in the bag. And so, yeah, how do we make that more common? How do we make people tell, like, because I don't know about you, that's the reason that the best part of a conference is the happy hours afterwards, is because that's when people actually like trade secrets. They have 2 or 3 beers in them and you finally start to learn some real stuff. How do we make that more common?
Yeah, right now it's really tough with COVID. But the other side, like, you know, we've got text chains that we're sharing some information. Are you seeing this? I think like the more frequently that we talk about the good and bad trends across our business and like what we're doing, you know, the first couple months, it was $1 in, $1 out. I'm sure that everybody here and everybody listening can see that. You would sell a $10 million deal and then somebody canceled a $12 million deal. And so everything was coming in and going out at the same rate. Now it's stabilizing a little bit.
Or real quick, the other side of that, you sell a $10 million deal, but really only 6 million happened of the 10.
100%.
Is that too, right? So,
or you're given 12 million in value.
Exactly. And none of that stuff is secrets. And actually it's funny because the more that you talk and the more that we talk on these text chains, it's like, oh, you're doing something quite similar to us. Your PR is just a little bit different than ours is, right? Like publishers they're defined by their content and context, not so much about like their secret sauce, and they're defined by how well they're able to distill the value, more so than I think the actual like user. That would be my not very PR friendly thing, but that's the truth, right? We're servicing a client and we're hitting somebody in the mindset of what the user is looking for at that time. The better you're able to distill, what does it look like on the Atlantic? What does it look like when you're on BuzzFeed? What does it look like when you're reading the New York Times? That advertising experience changes, and how you hit somebody. Like I'm drinking coffee right now. If you hit me with a vodka club, I'm probably not going to want to consume that ad because we had a late night last night. And that's just where we are.
Just hit me with a different recipe in the morning.
It's got, I need a bloody mix with it. Like
it's a bloody mix, right? And so it's finding, it's using the data that we have to sort of navigate what is the mindset somebody's in, and it's going to be different. And I agree with you that we don't have all these tips and tricks, but there is something to helping brands navigate that a little bit.
Mindset is,
go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say mindset is a super interesting one because it touches on something that every brand yawns at when you tell them you're doing contextual based advertising or targeting. Everyone's like, this is like 10 years ago. This really isn't that sexy. I want, more deterministic data. But isn't that what, like, the whole right ad in front of the right person at the right time? Right time is 1/3 of that equation.
Right.
And context is that entirely, isn't it? Like it is being aware of what sort of device they're on, how they got to a page, what time of day it is locally for them, all of that stuff. What is their normal consumption habits versus now, like how big is this article versus like all of these things matter. And yet it almost feels like we're forced to repackage these, again, motivations or mindset targeting in like some way to sort of trick buyers into doing the thing that is actually best for them.
That would be my one call to action, I think, for everybody is we're trying to trick everybody to saying, this is what happened years ago with that kind of sale. People were like, oh, cool, it's going to work 100% of the time. And you just got it. Like nobody spun up teams to explain why they were navigating that sort of data cycle to them. They're just like, it's going to work. Trust us. Here's what the data looks like. You can have it back if you want it. That's the one thing that scares me around all these spin-ups of just selling your first data to somebody. Like a buyer is going to say, that sounds great. It's really transactable. Everybody's talking about transacting on the data. Nobody's sitting down with their clients. That's the one thing that we are lucky enough to have a big enough team to sit down with some of our biggest clients and say, here's what the mindset of that person who saw your ad in this time was. Here's what we suggest you do. And they're receptive of it. They're the more sort of progressive clients that we've seen. But you're right. Like buyers don't care. They yawn at it. They're like, that sounds hard. That sounds not transactable. Like I don't have enough money or time or effort to do it. I'm going to run it through the open auction. And
it's interesting. It's another layer of complexity. Really is what we're talking about, right? It's another layer of complexity where as a seller, you're not necessarily able to help even tell the story, right? Or help someone through a process or bring in maybe not you, but the rest of your teams to be able to help to do that, right? Do you think that if there was from the buyer sort of perspective, a greater collaboration effort to go sit with the client together to be able to sort of help tell that could be helpful in the process?
I think it's only helpful insofar as folks like yourself, Ryan, like all the people that come on the show sort of educate their clients that it's important. That would be my, how do we talk a little bit more? I think that we all have the value and we're able to do that. Obviously we've got our own day jobs and there's only so many people that can talk about these kind of things to clients and like
it's a small universe, right? It's a small universe. It's
but it would be so, this is what I keep going to. It would be so great because we need to, the buyers that are interested just want to be educated further. They want to go from a 101 to a 201. But there are a lot of buyers that aren't at all aware or are using a managed service type agency in which they're a layer removed from all of that.
True.
The
Yeah.
agency's making these decisions, and honestly, to an agency, it might be great for my client, but if I can't reproduce this for multiple clients or if my 25-year-old media planner can't grok this and do it, then like I don't care about it all that much. Also, if I can't turn around and then sell it to I have to fully understand it to be able to sell the sizzle to my client to care about it, so I can charge and get my 15%. There's this is a constant push and pull between agencies, publishers, and brands. But yes, if we just had a way to educate buyers a little bit more on some of this stuff, and then we could use a lot of education on this too. Like, what are the things that matter to them? What are the things they don't actually care about? Like, it's just, it feels like everyone's so scared to do that. I mean, it takes a lot of time too, but I feel like, I don't know, I've never heard of, and maybe this exists, I've never heard of a group of brands, like people high up at brands willing to put their names out there to be like, sure, I'll be a part of this. If you exist and you listen to this, A, congratulations, you're one of the few. B, please reach out to, I would love to just have, even not recorded in any way, shape, or form, just constructive conversations around this stuff, because and I don't mean to make all agencies sound that way. There are some very smart ones and some very smart people at agencies. Just generally, the mean tends to be about that.
Yeah, for anybody watching and listening, good news. Ryan and I have a few folks that will be coming on in the next couple of weeks to actually talk about that from the agency side and be able to sort of touch on some of those points. So definitely make sure you look for that in some upcoming episodes. But we're pumped about that. I wanted
They're always so good at that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We got more, and they're coming. No, what's kind of cool too. I wanted to touch on a couple of things, Ryan. Actually, you brought up, and Dave earlier you brought up, because they all kind of go together. One of them was time. One of them was about cycles. One of them was about even the pressures, sort of stepping outside of what we do, that ultimately make it down to our teams, and especially already sort of burdened ad ops teams, and so talk a little bit about that, Dave, from your perspective and experiences recently, and also especially what it sort of looks like now when it feels like we have even less time on the calendar coming out of 2 or 3 real rough months.
Yeah, I mean, I think managing an ad ops team they might be the hardest team you can manage in media, knowing that they're on call basically 24/7 and having that empathy to know that a seller is not really being the bad guy. It's the agency who doesn't have their assets together, or they're waiting on brand approval. It's sort of the last leg of the trip once it gets to the ad ops team. I think that's certainly accelerated during COVID, and everybody feels that they're on call 24/7. This is my Sunday. When am I actually off? So it's certainly accelerated in that capacity. Some of the things that we've been doing is what does a day off look like for you? What does your hours look like, and making sure that we've got the hard stop, which has always been a little bit more fluid because it hasn't been as big of an issue, but it's really enforcing that people have to have lives. And the thing that we as publishers need to figure out is there's certainly burnout right now. It's certainly hard to maintain great talent if you're asking them to be a working engine that's firing all times of day. And that's what this is asking for.
It's interesting, trying to measure that burnout, like you were talking about. Those times don't exist really anymore, right? Because it could be over at lunch. It could be over some beers after work. You know what I mean? Where even as management or just coworkers or everyone would be able to sort of feel what somebody might be going through, right? And then be able to sort of or maybe getting coffee in the morning too, right? So it's interesting, like talking about that burnout when things sort of end. It's hard to even measure what's happening around you with your coworkers or superiors or subordinates, and then being able to measure that. So Ryan.
Well, and going back to what you were saying, I don't know about you, but we tend to, at least our big stuff is pretty long sales cycle. It tends, if you're producing any sort of custom content or you're doing an event or anything like that, there used to be 6-8 weeks lead time going into it. And going back to your dollar in, dollar out times, dollar out was all of those 6 to 8 week lead times. Dollar in now is this very short turnaround. This sales cycle has compressed to the point where, we're still like, again, it's nice that things have stabilized, and I'm like, from a revenue perspective, feel good about that. But yeah, at the same time, it's very, very hard because AdOps already is the one that feels like they have to eat shit all the time. Like this is, everything rolls downhill, and they're the goalies. And so because of that, yeah, you no longer have 6 to 8 weeks. You no longer have 3 days to QA tags and set up test pages and stuff like that. Like you multiple times in this last week, I mean, my team had sub 24 hours to go through a complex IO, complex targeting, tag sheet, all of that stuff, and get it live. And then turn around and get screenshots of every single variation and blah, blah, blah. Like all of that is occurring in such a short time frame. It's hard. We've resorted regarding the burnout, just like forcing people to take time off. We're just like, literally, you have like, it's hard. It's weird because we have a flexible vacation policy. So like, it's weird to tell someone to take a week off when they don't, like they could take whatever week off ostensibly. I think just for some people, it helps to have the permission to do that. Just be like, or like take Thursday, Friday, Monday, just like give yourself a 5-day weekend. I found that works. And most people are then willing to go the extra mile for a teammate if they know like, but I'm going to get mine here in a week or so. Like it's just,
you got to have something to look forward to.
Yeah.
I think is the thing, and summertime highlights that the most. Like, some companies back in the heyday and the golden day, the summer Friday is coming up. Now it's like, I don't know if we could do that, but why don't you look forward to this date and you've got something planned. Mm-hmm. I know for a long time it was hard to find where am I going to travel to? Like, I'm not going to travel to anywhere.
Well, that's the hard part now. People you don't get to go on vacation. You just, I guess, get to sit on your couch and not read Slack and emails. I guess that's like the one difference.
Yeah. And then feel the pressure of not reading Slack and emails. It's interesting. I wanted to highlight an interesting article a couple of weeks back in Digiday about actually some of the pressure that I feel like is happening sort of a little bit further up the chain. And I think it sort of ties into what we were just discussing about, have to be able to execute, all the assets, the creatives, even make changes because some things were set in place and then they've changed completely now. And some of that I think has to do a lot with some of the creatives and some of the actual ads themselves, because so much of how we're living right now reflects nothing like the creatives that were produced, right? So you can't have video with people just, jumping around in large groups and things like that. So creative assets are changing that way. And especially as it pertains to programmatic, a lot of the creatives that we may have that weren't custom or that are custom even have to change, right? The calls to action, what you're doing, the language has to change, the copy has to change, right? So now if you're an auto sort of brand or trying to drive people to the dealerships, you have to actually talk about a safe buying experience versus maybe this great leasing program, right? And, all those sort of things have impact, which in turn, I think, help publishers be able to communicate upwards or sellers upwards as well when talking with finance and revenue because the money changes, right? So what I mean by that is that if all of those things are slowing down, because I think there's a false sort of equivalence of resuming spend now and having it increase is the same as what it was looking like before or last year, right?
We're better than the apocalypse. We are not on par with where we should have. I don't know about you, Dave, but like our forecasting for like RPMs and revenue per session, that sort of thing is not there, at least programmatically. It's trending way better than like when I was doing a forecast in May and it was like, man, how low is low? But it's much better now, but it still doesn't feel like, despite I've read a few articles of people like, it's way up. But I'm like, yeah, from what though? What was your, what are we comparing this to?
I mean, the first 2 months were gangbusters of 2020. Everybody was like, this is the year that we're buying that house.
Seriously.
This is that year. And
shout out to January and
had my can tickets booked. Like I was ready for that yacht.
No, it's crazy. Because again, that pressure, and we've gone through it as being operators for several years. And I talked with a few other folks during the week about when the other money isn't showing up from the events, right? When the other money isn't showing up from canceled orders, that pressure falls right back on programmatic, right? It falls right back on yield teams. It falls right back on others. Hey, get more, get this. And at a certain point, you can't fix the health of the ecosystem because it was sick. It was literally sick for 120 days, 100 days. Pick whatever increment of time you want. So there's no way to accelerate how that heals, even though it's much better, obviously. So just an interesting thought. And I hope folks that have to communicate that information upwards or have to deal with that pressure have some resources to be able to understand that you're not alone with that. So.
Well, and the question that drives me craziest that I get, and I'm sure it's well-meaning, is like, are there any quick wins? What could we do for quick wins? And I almost want to be like, if there were any, I would have thought of them by now. I promise you. I'm asking everyone. Like, there's no easy programmatic wins. I don't care what any of your exchanges or their partners are telling you. Hey, if you just add my identity adapter to your thing, just wait. We're seeing exponential growth. Right.
We need to do a whole episode on that. On just the false promises of Q3, Q4 in the subject lines. Ranges
QBRs
of
say
$4 to $50 CPM increments. It's bananas.
I love when I get to see like H2 and H1 2021 like product roadmaps, and I'm just like, what is this? Like what? All right, so let's go back.
It's like there's more money down the line. Classic thing.
So we hit on contextual a bit. So the right person at the right time, right person part. That's super hard right now. Well, it's super hard if you're trying to do it in a first party only world. We still have third party, but like, do we, or how long do you want to rely on it? Or do you really feel that good? And then there are a lot of these companies that are like, well, we're using third party cookie now, but we'll have the magic bullet by the time it comes around. Like it's the like, don't worry, trust us, which that's never burned anyone before. So like, how are you thinking this through? Oh, is it me that froze or is it him?
It's funny because I joined BuzzFeed.
Oh, now you're back. You're good.
Go.
I'm back. I'm good.
You're back.
There you go.
Hi. Welcome
Hi.
back. One of the reasons that I joined BuzzFeed is because and this is not so much a plug, I think it's harder for other organizations who've got a very clear editorial vision about exactly what they write about, what the remit is. BuzzFeed sort of is like, we know the audience around these Gen Zers and we're able to cater some content towards them. What are they interested in reading? We do a lot of testing in that phase. And so it's less about how do we extract the most out of like the context for you. And a lot of companies like, am I freezing again?
You're good. Just keep rolling. Don't lose your train of thought.
And that's one of the areas that I think we succeed in. I also realize that it's not as easy for another publisher in that sense. Like, that's one of the areas that some people are like, oh, that feels like crazy to do that, but it's easy to spin up a quiz that says like, how are you feeling this morning? Like, how do we market that information? How do we provide a service to somebody that they want to read it, but also take action on? Our affiliate business is booming because we're able to say, here's what we like to shop for as editors. And they like to look at that. So like affiliate and data around context is like sort of the new transaction method where it's like, it's been very hard. Everybody says just buy the banner ads and that's great. And that's very transactional, but there's a lot of the content side for us that is really hard to sort of like evangelize, but also.
So we're one of those old organizations with a very clear firewall between business and editorial. But I'm just super curious on how the other side lives. Is when you guys see this, is it more optimization around the actual content or the format of the content, or is it both?
It's totally both. Like, what we don't do is say a brand wants to sell product. We don't just say, cool, you get our site and we're going to create whatever you want to, right? Like we're listening to what readers want to read about. They might be saying it's coming up on holidays. We know that 80% of them are going to shop the same amount or more this year, but they need help navigating their budget, right? And so like, we're going to say, here's all the gifts you can get for $30 or less. And then we say to somebody like a Best Buy or Amazon, say, you have to be around this because if you don't, then your competitor is going to be able to surround that context. We're going to be able to sell. You can embed your link, and here's a link out to what it looks like. We're going to create that content anyway because we're listening to what the audience says. But an agency doesn't really care as much about that. They just want to say, at the end of the day, brand, like, that's collaborating and saying, here's what we can do. They want to put that pixel on the page to create the sort of walled garden for them and say we're the only person who gets it. But the truth is, like, we're finding success on creating urgency around the things that we're listening to our creating content around it in context, and then saying, look, we know exactly who the brand that my connection's unstable. I see what you guys were laughing at. But that's sort of how we're navigating it a little bit more so than what the old guard is basically like, we're going to write about this thing no matter what. Signals, I think a little bit more, and being able to be a little bit flexible. Pets are huge during the pandemic. Let's up the number of pet content. We're very much a lifestyle website, in that sense that we can write about just about anything. We're talking about Netflix doesn't have a whole bunch more shows coming. What else can you do to entertain yourself? Whereas we're not talking about the news. It's all doom and gloom all the time. We've got something that it's culturally relevant stuff that people are looking for. Brands are just afraid often to activate against that kind of stuff because they don't know what it looks like. But the truth is, we won't know what it looks like until we get the signals from sort of our users. So that's a long-winded way of saying nobody's cracked it yet, but we don't have like the editorial calendar that we want to share with a brand because we're listening to the audience of our content, and being able to react to that is something that both our sales team and our operations teams have had to sort of accelerate on, being able to react quicker than ever before.
Part of me is a little bit jealous. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it's an interesting point, Dave, that sometimes in like what we do, and especially with some of the teams that we're so close with, there is an element of predictability, not just predictability, but like really strong understanding of a potential outcome. Right. And we have the data science behind it, right? We have the right focus and the right people and the results. And then we actually have time over, matched with that. So it makes the end result understanding pretty good. So it is interesting thinking about the advertiser, the product, and the execution, almost having a new feeling now where it's like, let's step out there together, right? And discover the success together. That to me feels more traditional, if you will. And then I got lost in the middle with the predictability is going to be X of this doing wrong. Well, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, like now, that bold sense of being able to step out there and do that again. It's kind of cool to hear that, because that's really advertising. That's advertising. You know what I mean?
And you guys are hunting for the content in the same way that they're hunting for the user. So I can see there being good overlap. Yep. All right, not to take up too much more of your Sunday. My last question, which just sort of came to me, and I wish I would have asked a previous guest, but you get to be the first, which is just like, what is the thing that currently has your like curiosity or your interest? I'll give an example so you have time to think. But like for me, the thing that I'm like just starting to mull, it's not like a polished idea or anything else, is this notion of, so we have a consultancy side, so I kind of get to peek into like how they think through plans and profitability. And on the media side, we try to think through profitability, but it's so much like, whereas consultancy is easy. Hours worked, hours estimated, hours worked, cost against those people that work those hours, boom, that's how much it's going to cost, apply a margin to it, we're good. Media, you have this like, there's an entire RFP process, plus there's like proactive proposals that may or may not work. Your win rate's much lower than consultancy. And then you're selling a free thing as opposed to selling human hours. You're selling impressions, which come because you have editorial. And like, it's almost, so it's a very difficult thing that I've been like trying to mull through, in this notion of like really understanding how profitable a thing is. Because I want to be able to, and when a sales rep comes back to me and says we have to slash our prices in half, I want to have a reason to either say, sure, we can, or no, we can't. Or like when a client asks to delay something for 6 months, I can say, great, that's going to cost us this amount of money. Can't do that right now, but that's been sort of the thing that is super interesting and complicated that I'm interested in. Along those lines, is there anything that you've just been thinking through when it comes to Q4 or next year, or just maybe in the distant future that is there?
Very similarly, but around the data and content and context. So it actually segues really well into what we've been thinking about, and I've been thinking about is, the media side is important, but how do we help brands navigate? Right now, they value somebody who is flexible, agile, and reactive to changing market trends because they don't know what tomorrow looks like. You don't know what the election is going to look like in November. You don't know all these things, whereas media is often a predictable thing. You know how much inventory you're going to get. Turns out that was turned on its head. From a data side, the consultancy is much more attractive, I think, to buyers, where they might say, this is where my head is at, and this is where I think that a lot of folks are spinning up resources, is how do we get in front of brands in the right way to say, here's what we see in terms of content and context, and here's how we activate against that data. I don't think anybody's cracked it, but that is going to be something that brands need and want, and they need to be able to figure out how do they marry their messaging from Tuesday to Friday, when next Monday they might not know what it looks like the next week, and they want to have a good partner. And so top of my mind is creating an organization that is agile enough to be able to change with the times, but also provide enough quantitative sort of data behind it, right? So that we are both profitable. We can't spread ourselves way too thin, but we can also activate very quickly. And so how do you marry those turnkey packages, whether it's media, but truly what you're paying for is the consultancy service, where you're saying, you're right, it is free, but the truth is you're paying for that consultancy.
That's a really, really tough thing because it requires sort of like a thin org, because you need a lot of people across. I mean, the larger the org is, the more groups, teams, different job titles, but you need a lot of them to be working together at the same time, looking at as close to real-time data, and everyone sort of having the data literacy to know what it means. That's ambitious.
Really hard, but it is ambitious. And I think, when we talk over drinks, this is what we do all day. It's like spreading the idea of like, we need more Ryans, like in that organization. Like we need our salespeople to be like a Ryan, that's sort of the culture that we want to foster, both on the operations and sort of the products that we push out, so that you can at least say the one smart nugget. And a client goes, you know what, I trust you, you're smart, you've got a good team that's behind you, and you're going to be able to help me address my messaging, because people are struggling to do that. Brands, agencies, content producers, nobody's getting it entirely right, but we're able to say, here's how fast we can shift. And that's the other reason that the teams they're saying, oh my God, everything is moving so fast, and burning out. But the culture I've seen, it's changed from just where do we go? It's how fast can we get there right now? And the consultancy around that is where my head is at.
Well, cool. Well, Dave, thanks for spending some time with us. Yes, absolutely. Companies need more Ryans. They need more Dave Ponds too. They need more Daves. So
I don't need more competition.
Listen, thanks for hanging out with us. And listen, you're going to come back again. We're all going to sort of check back with each other after this Q3 and Q4.
Yeah, maybe like in person, within 6 feet of one another.
Actually, we want to be there. Ryan and I want to come to where you are, literally right now. Can we get a quick shot back there? Can we get a quick shot? Oh man, I see some columns.
Not gonna show them how you live. All right.
Fine. All right, brother. Thanks a lot for hanging with us. We miss you, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, I miss you too. Thanks very much for having me.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks. Stay fun, everybody.